Captain Atlas, the Bermuda Triangle Mystery. Captain Atlas and his whale companion Marin had finally met the mysterious professor. But the professor being here was not a coincidence. They just didn't know it yet. The professor carefully examined Atlas's sailboat. His eyes moved slowly across the hull, studying every detail. Ships that entered the Bermuda Trap rarely returned. Sometimes ancient wrecks appeared again. Ships that had disappeared hundreds of years ago, but never with living people inside. Atlas's boat, however, looked new. The professor thought to himself, "This ship looks too new. It cannot have come from there." He was about to turn back toward his research vessel when Atlas called out, "Professor!" The professor stopped. Atlas stepped forward. "We came out of the Bermuda Trap." The professor froze. "What did you say?" For a moment, silence filled the air. Atlas looked at Marin. Marin nodded gently. It was time to tell the truth. Atlas reached into his pocket and pulled out an old chart. "We followed a Viking star map." The professor looked surprised. "A Viking map?" Atlas nodded. "It belonged to my great-great-grandfather. Vikings used it to navigate the seas. According to legend, it was a gift from Odin." The professor studied the map carefully. Stars were drawn across the old parchment. Atlas continued. The map pointed to a specific moment, February 21st. The professor frowned. "A date?" Atlas nodded. "Yes, it was the only moment when the stars aligned differently. According to the map, it was the only time the gate could open." The professor leaned closer to the map. Then suddenly he noticed something. The brightest star pointed directly to the position of the black hole. A thought crossed his mind. Could it be? Did the Vikings already know about this cycle? Atlas shrugged slightly. "We just followed the stars, and somehow we made it out." The professor slowly exhaled. "Incredible! Truly incredible." At the same time, inside the Bermuda Trap, it was the morning of February 21st. Captain Kruger stood on the deck of his ship. For years, nothing had changed in this strange place. But that morning felt different. As the sun slowly rose above the horizon, Kruger watched the ocean. Suddenly, far away in the sky, a thin beam of light appeared. It flashed across the clouds, then disappeared. Kruger froze. His heart began to race. A thought came to his mind. Could it be? He quickly reached into his coat pocket. The white envelope Atlas had given him was still there. With trembling hands he opened it. Inside was a map, and Atlas's letter. Kruger began reading. As he reached the final lines, tears filled his eyes. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "So, you made it, Atlas?" Then he shouted toward the sky, "You did it, Captain Atlas!" For the first time, someone had escaped the Bermuda Trap. The story continues. The professor turned back to Atlas. "Would you like to learn the real secret of the Bermuda Triangle?" Atlas and Marin looked at each other. The answers they had been searching for might finally be revealed. The professor invited them aboard his research vessel. Atlas stepped onto the deck and looked around in amazement. "Wow, this ship is huge." The professor smiled. "This is a research vessel." On the deck stood a massive deep-sea exploration robot. Atlas asked in surprise, "What is that?" "A deep-sea research robot. The ocean below us is nearly 10 kilometers deep." Atlas and Marin looked at each other. 10 kilometers? The professor nodded. "Yes." Marin smiled. "Even I can't dive that deep." The professor laughed. "That's why we have technology." They explored the ship. Helicopter pad, laboratories, giant radar systems, and finally they entered the control room. Atlas looked around and smiled. "This place looks like a spaceship." The professor gave a mysterious smile. "Maybe you're closer to the truth than you think." The next morning, the professor brought them into a research room. Huge screens displayed images of space. The professor zoomed in on a distant point. The image grew larger. Soon a massive cosmic structure appeared, surrounded by colorful gas clouds. The professor spoke. "This is a black hole." Atlas looked confused. I thought black holes were black. The professor smiled. So did we, until our technology improved. Then he continued. This black hole aligns with Earth 4 times every year. 3 of those times, it pulls everything passing through the Bermuda Triangle. Atlas spoke slowly. So, a black hole swallowed us? The professor nodded. Yes, and it transported you somewhere else. He continued. Once every year, the opposite gate opens, and it releases what was trapped inside. Atlas whispered. The Bermuda Trap. The professor nodded. That's what we call it. Then he looked at Atlas. Until now, no one has ever escaped. Until you. A few days later, they arrived at the research center in Svalbard. Huge glass domes, artificial lakes, palm trees. It felt like another world. Training began. Pressure chamber tests, space navigation, simulation flights, orientation training. Scientists carefully observed Atlas and Marin. These tests were extremely difficult, but Atlas and Marin passed every single one. The scientists were astonished. Finally, the last test day arrived. The entire center gathered. Atlas and Marin completed the final simulation. The hall filled with applause. The professor embraced them. You're ready. But suddenly, an alarm echoed through the base. A scientist rushed into the room. Professor, the black hole is moving again. The professor's face became serious. The time has come. He turned to Atlas and Marin. Come with me. They stepped into an elevator. It descended deeper and deeper underground. Minutes passed. Atlas asked, How deep are we going? The professor smiled. 1 kilometer. The doors opened. A massive hangar appeared. Then a giant door slowly slid open. Inside stood an enormous vehicle. Atlas stared in shock. Is that a submarine? The professor smiled. No, this is a spaceship. Atlas and Marin froze. The professor walked up the stairs and turned. Are you coming? They entered the ship. It was enormous. The professor handed them 2 suits. Your gear? Atlas asked. What's the mission? The professor smiled. You'll find out on the way. The hangar doors slowly opened. Before them stretched the vast darkness of space. The professor spoke one last time. This is the gate. Atlas looked confused. A gate? The professor nodded. A gate to space, and it will take you close to the black hole. Atlas and Marin took their seats. The engines ignited, and the spacecraft began moving toward the light. The adventure was no longer only in the ocean. Now, it would continue in space.